November 8, 1942, 9:00 in the morning, outside El Anchor, French Morocco. Dust hangs low over the road like smoke that hasn't decided where to go. Lieutenant Edwin K. Smith crouches behind a thin steel gun shield, eyes narrowed against the glare. In front of him, the barrel of an American 37mm anti-tank gun points down a narrow stretch of road bordered by scrub, stone, and shallow drainage ditches. Beyond that road, 3 armored cars are coming fast. The men around Smith say nothing. They don't need to. Hands tighten on shell casings. Sweat runs down backs beneath woolly uniforms. A loader shifts his boots in the dirt. Somewhere to the left, another gun crew waits with the same stillness like coiled wire. Then comes the hardest order a soldier can receive. Do not fire unless fired upon. The column closes the distance. French tricolor flags flicker against the armored hulls. Engines grow louder. Machine guns mounted in turrets glint in the North African sun. These are Vichy French troops' former allies, now defenders of territory the Americans have just landed to seize as part of Operation Torch. Would they fight? No one behind those gun shields knows. Smith watches through field glasses, jaw set. If the armored cars pass through, they threaten the flank of the 26th Infantry Regiment, part of the veteran 1st Infantry Division. If he fires first, he could trigger a battle no one wants. If he waits too long, his men could die where they kneel. The lead vehicle swerves slightly. A hatch opens. Then the road erupts. A burst of machine gun fire rattles from the lead armored car, bullets snapping through brush and slamming into dirt banks around the American position. That is all the permission Smith needs. Fire. The first 37mm gun barks with a sharp metallic crack. Then the second joins it. Recoil jolts the carriages backward. Brass spins into the dust. Loaders ram fresh rounds home with practiced violence. The shells streak downrange and strike the lead armored car in flashes of sparks. The French answer with cannon fire. A shell screams overhead. Another smashes into earth nearby, showering one gun crew with dirt and stones. Machine gun tracers rake the muzzle flashes of the American positions. The roadblock becomes a furnace of noise. Yet the little 37mm guns keep firing. They are not large weapons. They are not glamorous weapons. Their shields are thin. Their shells are modest. But in the hands of crews drilled to precision, they are fast, accurate, and deadly enough. Another hit. The lead armored car bursts into flame. Black smoke punches skyward. Men scramble from hatches, dropping into a ditch beside the road. The second vehicle brakes hard, trapped by wreckage ahead. Then, from far down the line, an American gunner steadies his sights at nearly 1,800 yards, an ambitious shot for a weapon many would soon call outdated. He fires. The shell strikes the rear armored car. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then fire blooms from the engine compartment. Flames crawl over steel. The rear vehicle is now a burning barricade. The middle car is boxed in. Its crew abandons it and dives for cover. In less than minutes, the fight has drained out of the Vichy defenders. Smoke rises from 2 wrecks. The trapped men in the ditch realize the road belongs to someone else now. White cloth appears. Hands rise. The surrender is almost anticlimactic after the violence. The gun crews remain at their weapons, ears ringing, hands trembling with spent adrenaline. Some grin. Some stare silently at the wrecks. One man laughs too loudly. Another vomits behind the wheel trail and wipes his mouth before anyone can notice. For the men of Lieutenant Smith's platoon, this is the first proof that their little gun can kill armored vehicles in war. But history is already moving faster than they know. Because while the M337mm anti-tank gun has just announced itself in North Africa, elsewhere on battlefields across Europe and Russia, tanks are growing thicker-skinned, heavier, more ruthless. Armor is changing. Guns must change with it. And the American 37mm is already behind. Still, in 1942, it is the primary anti-tank weapon of U.S. infantry regiments. Thousands have been built. They can be towed by jeep, manhandled by crews, hidden behind hedges, dragged through mud, and fired quickly. For mobile infantry formations, it offers something commanders desperately value: speed. Yet speed is not everything when steel gets thicker. The weapon's story begins years before El Anchor, in an era when military planners looked backward as much as forward. In the First World War, tanks had first appeared in numbers, and many armies concluded that future wars would need dedicated guns to stop them. Small, fast-firing cannons seemed the answer. By the late 1930s, most nations embraced anti-tank guns in calibers around 37 mm to 47 mm. Germany had the Pak-36. France had its Hotchkiss designs. Other armies followed similar logic. A compact cannon firing armor-piercing rounds could ambush tanks before tanks overran infantry. America, late to rearmament, studied foreign models carefully. What it chose would become the M337mm. And soon, that choice would follow American soldiers from desert roads to jungle trails, from frozen ridges to Pacific beaches, sometimes as tank killer, sometimes as bunker buster, sometimes simply because nothing better was available. The men cleaning powder residue from their barrels near El Anchor do not know any of this yet. They only know they survived. They only know their gun worked today. And they do not know that within months, many crews would face enemy tanks their shells could barely scratch. The sun climbs higher over the Moroccan road. Burned metal ticks as it cools. Prisoners gather under guard. Ammunition boxes are restacked. Lieutenant Smith looks down the road where the smoke still drifts. For one morning, the M337mm has been enough. But war never stands still. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. Summer, 1938. The gun fires with a flat crack that rolls across the test range. Observers lower binoculars. Engineers scribble notes. Officers in khaki glance at one another, then back at the target where fresh holes mark the steel plate. Dust drifts across the firing line. The United States Army, still small, still underfunded, is trying to answer a question that Europe may soon settle by blood. How do you stop tanks? Not battleships, not bombers, Tim's. The Great War had shown what armored vehicles could do when barbed wire and machine guns locked armies in place. They were slow then, unreliable, clumsy iron boxes. But every serious officer knew machines improve. Engines get stronger, armor gets thicker, guns get larger. If another war came, tanks would not crawl. They would charge. American planners studied what foreign armies were building. Germany favored the nimble 37mm anti-tank gun. France relied on similar weapons. The idea appealed to practical minds. Instead of massive artillery pieces, infantry regiments could have their own lightweight cannon, ready to move quickly and fire directly at enemy armor. Cheap enough to build, light enough to tow, deadly enough at least for now. So the Ordnance Department searched for a design. They examined foreign weapons, especially a respected German model. Lessons were borrowed, modified, Americanized. Nothing unusual in that. Armies have always learned from rivals, even future enemies. The result was a compact gun with split trails, rubber tires, a low silhouette, and a thin armored shield for the crew. It fired a 37x 223mm round at high velocity for its day. To the men who designed it, it seemed modern. This would become the M337mm anti-tank gun. M337mm anti-tank gun. At first glance, it looked almost elegant. Its barrel was just over 7 feet long. The breech operated quickly. A trained crew could fire rapidly, load smoothly, traverse the weapon by hand, and relocate faster than larger guns could dream of moving. On roads, it could be towed by a light truck or jeep. Off roads, crews could shove and pivot it into firing position themselves. That mattered. Because anti-tank warfare is often a matter of seconds. A gun too heavy to reposition is a gun that dies where it sits. An officer watching trials at Aberdeen kneels beside one of the wheels. He imagines this cannon dug into a hedgerow lane, waiting until enemy tanks exposed their flanks. Another imagines it guarding bridges, crossroads, mountain passes. Another sees columns of infantry advancing with their own armored insurance. The army approves it in 1940. Production begins. Factories that had once turned out peacetime goods now tool up for war orders. Steel arrives by rail. Castings are machined. Breech blocks are fitted. Sights calibrated. Tires mounted. Paint sprayed. Inspection stamps hammered into metal that will soon cross oceans. America is not yet officially at war, but the world already is. Germany overruns Poland in 1939. France collapses in 1940. British forces abandon Dunkirk. In every campaign, armored warfare evolves with terrifying speed. Tanks spearhead breakthroughs. Aircraft coordinate strikes. Motorized columns exploit chaos. And somewhere in those reports is a warning. The small anti-tank guns that looked sufficient only a few years earlier are beginning to struggle. German Panzer Roman III and Roman IV tanks receive thicker armor. New Soviet designs appear, the T-34 and KV series machines that shock even the Germans. The duel between gun and armor is accelerating. but procurement moves slower than battlefields. The United States has already chosen its standard infantry anti-tank gun. Tooling exists, contracts are signed, training manuals are printed, thousands of troops are learning to operate the M3. Changing course now would cost time America may not have. So production surges. By the time the United States enters the war after Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the M3 is everywhere in the expanding army. Infantry regiments receive anti-tank platoons equipped with the weapon. Marines train with it. Crews learn loading drills until motions become instinct. Shell out, reach open, round in, plus, in, flare. At training camps across the country, young men who have never seen combat practice against moving silhouettes pulled by cables. They judge lead, distance, and timing. Instructors bark corrections. Gunners curse missed shots. Loaders race stopwatches. Some men nickname the gun affectionately. Others complain about its cramped shield and punishing muzzle blast. Most simply learn to trust the mechanism in front of them. Because soldiers rarely choose their tools, they master what they are given. The gun had strengths no critic could deny. It was reliable, simpler than larger artillery, easy to conceal, fast firing. Ammunition was compact enough for crews to carry in useful quantities. Against light armor, armored cars, tankettes, gun positions, and machine gun nests, it could be brutally effective. But against the future, that was less certain. A classified discussion in Washington weighs possibilities. Some officers argue for heavier calibers immediately. Others insist the 37mm still has value and that mobility is being underestimated. Budgets, production realities, transport concerns all collide in rooms far from battle. Meanwhile, young privates in muddy camps learn how to dig gun pits and range targets. War often punishes arguments with reality. In North Africa, reality would soon arrive. In the Philippines, reality was already closing in. In the Pacific, jungle warfare would ask different questions entirely. And in Europe, when American soldiers finally met German armor in force, many crews would stare through M3 sights at tanks their shells could barely penetrate from the front. Still, in 1941 and early 1942, the little gun represented readiness. America needed weapons now, not perfect weapons later. A sergeant at a stateside range slaps the shield plate and grins at his crew. This thing'll do the job. Maybe he believes it. Maybe he needs to. The sun dips over Aberdeen as another round slams into target steel. Officers depart with folders under their arms. Workers continue shifts through the night in distant factories. Freight cars wait to move crates toward ports. Thousands of M3 guns are going to war. Some will win sharp, sudden fights like the roadblock at El Anchor. Some will be abandoned in retreat. Some will be turned against bunkers because tanks are too dangerous. Some crews will discover courage can outlast caliber, but not always overcome it. The army has chosen a small gun for a very large war. And soon, the battlefield will pass judgment. December 22, 1941, Lingayen Gulf, Luzon, Philippines. The sea is full of landing craft. Gray dawn spreads over the water as Japanese transports lie offshore like dark islands. Engines drone, ramps slam down. Soldiers pour toward beaches already shivering under artillery fire. Palm trees bend in the concussion. Smoke drifts inland. Along roads leading south, American and Filipino troops rush into positions that had been planned, revised, doubted, and now must somehow hold. Among them are crews dragging small anti-tank guns into place. The M337mm anti-tank gun is entering war under the worst possible conditions: too little time, too few resources, and an enemy moving with terrifying speed. M337mm anti-tank gun. Only weeks earlier, many of these men were training, drilling, or assuming war might still be distant. Then came Pearl Harbor. Then came the strikes across the Pacific. Then came Japanese landings across the Philippines. Now there is no distance left. A corporal from the Philippine Scouts wipes rainwater off the gun sight with his sleeve. Beside him, a loader kneels over ammunition boxes stacked in mud. Nearby, infantrymen hack fields of fire through brush with machetes. Trucks choke roads. Civilians move south with bundles, children, livestock, anything they can carry. Retreat has a sound. It is engines grinding low gear, shouted directions, crying babies, rifles clattering against truck rails, and somewhere behind it all, gunfire growing louder. General Douglas MacArthur's command cannot defend every beach. The defenders begin falling back toward the Baton Peninsula, where mountains and narrow approaches may allow a smaller force to delay the Japanese. To delay them, roads must be blocked. Bridges must be covered. Tanks must be stopped. That is where the 37mm crews come in. Japanese armor in the Philippines is not the heaviest in the world. Many vehicles are light tanks thinly armored, mobile, designed to support infantry and exploit breakthroughs. Against such targets, the M3 still has teeth. At a road junction near Rosario, a gun crew waits behind sandbags and cut brush. Their barrel points down a straight stretch of road lined with sugar cane. Sweat runs despite the morning air. Then the cane begins to move. Chest. A Japanese Type 95 light tank noses through the roadside growth, turret turning. Infantry follow behind it in short bounds. The gunner exhales. But the 37mm cracks. The shell punches into the tank's frontal plate with a metallic burst. The vehicle lurches, slews sideways, and stops. Hatch lids fly open. Crewmen spill out under rifle fire. Before anyone can cheer, another tank appears. Flare. The round skips sparks off the road. The second shot strikes the suspension. The tank halts, turrets still rotating, machine gun spraying wild arcs into the trees. Then mortar rounds begin dropping around the American position. This is the other truth of anti-tank warfare. Once you fire, everyone knows where you are. The gun crew works frantically. Loader rams another shell. Gunner corrects aim through dust. Section chief shouts over impacts. Nearby infantry flatten into foxholes as fragments snap through leaves. Another direct hit. The tank burns. But the roadblock cannot stay. Japanese infantry are already probing both flanks. Orders come down the line. Withdraw. The crew hooks the gun to a truck already crowded with men and gear. It takes precious minutes. Too many minutes. A shell lands nearby, killing the driver. Another truck must be found. Hands drag bodies aside because there is no time for ceremony. War strips dignity first. As the defense falls back toward Baton, the 37mm becomes less a tank killer than a delaying instrument. Guns are placed, fired, moved, placed again. Crews grow exhausted from digging positions only to abandon them hours later. Ammunition runs low. Spare parts scarcer still. Food begins to thin. So do faces. Yet again and again, the little gun proves useful when matched against Japanese light armor and improvised assaults. In narrow roads, jungle tracks, village streets, and bridge approaches, its small size becomes an advantage. It can hide where larger guns cannot. A Filipino sergeant laughs bitterly after watching 6 men drag one through swamp muck by hand. She is light enough to curse. At night, crews sleep beside their weapons when they sleep at all. Mosquitoes whine. Rain turns pits into soup. Men wake to distant engines and wonder if dawn brings tanks. Sometimes dawn brings artillery instead. By January 1942, forces are compressed onto Baton. Disease spreads. Supply collapse deepens. Horses are eaten. Rice is rationed. Ammunition is counted shell by shell. Still the guns remain in line. One battery uses canister rounds against infantry assaults at close range, turning the cannon into a giant shotgun. Another fires high explosive shells into tree lines where snipers hide. Some guns are camouflaged so carefully Japanese patrols pass within yards of them. The M3 survives because soldiers adapt faster than doctrine. But no weapon can fix starvation. No gun can replace medicine. No bravery can create air cover where none exists. Japanese pressure increases month by month. Bombing grows heavier. Artillery concentrations intensify. Men weaken visibly. Uniforms hang loose on bodies that once marched proudly. A gunner too weak to lift rounds alone now needs help from the assistant loader. Another collapses during emplacement and apologizes as if fatigue were a moral failure. Yet when tanks appear, crews still crawl to their sites. That is the cruel loyalty of soldiers. They keep answering the call on after the body has begun saying no. In April, the final offensive comes. Japanese artillery pounds Baton with a violence many survivors never forgot. Infantry break through sectors held by men barely able to stand. Positions unravel. Guns are knocked out, abandoned, or spiked to prevent capture. Some 37mm crews fire until overrun. Others destroy breach blocks with hammers and retreat carrying rifles. Some never leave their pits. When Baton falls on April 9th, 1942, tens of thousands enter captivity and the nightmare of the Death March begins. Scattered among the wreckage are ruined M3 guns, shields bent, wheels shattered, barrels blackened. They had done what they could. In the Philippines, the little cannon learned its first harsh lesson. A weapon may be adequate, even brave in service, but war is decided by more than caliber. And elsewhere, even as Bataan dies, American forces are landing in new theaters with the same gun. North Africa. Europe to come. The Pacific Islands beyond the horizon. The M337mm is only beginning its war. But in the deserts ahead, it will face enemies made of thicker steel. February 1943, central Tunisia, before dawn. The cold surprises everyone. Men who imagine Africa as endless heat stamp their boots against freezing ground while breath ghosts in the dark. The desert is silent for a moment, almost gentle, until engines begin somewhere beyond the ridgeline. Then comes the sound of tracks. American anti-tank crews wake fully at once. Across Tunisia, inexperienced U.S. forces are now facing veterans of the German Afrika Korps in battle-hardened Axis units retreating east after the defeats in Algeria and Morocco. The honeymoon of easy landings is over. This is not bitchy roadblocks and uncertain politics. This is armored war. And the little M337mm anti-tank gun is about to meet tanks built for killing. M337mm anti-tank gun. A gun crew from the 1st Infantry Division crouches behind scrub and stone. Their cannon is dug low, shield barely visible. Ammunition lies stacked beneath a tarp stiff with frost. The gunner peers through sights toward a gap in the hills where German armor is expected. He has heard stories already. Shells bouncing. Rounds shattering harmlessly. Crews waiting too long because they needed enemy tanks dangerously close before firing. Now he is about to decide which stories are true. The first silhouettes appear with sunrise. Long barrels. Angular turrets. Orderly spacing. German tanks advance with the calm confidence of men who have done this many times before. Panzer Roman III, Panzer Roman IV. Behind them, infantry and half-tracks. Farther back, artillery observers scanning for flashes. The American platoon commander waits. Range matters now more than ever. Too far, and 37mm rounds may fail to penetrate. Too close, and tanks can crush the position before enough shots are fired. The tanks close. Dust trails stream behind them. Flare. 3M3 guns open almost together. The recoil jolts crews backward. Shells streak out. One panzer jerks to a halt, smoke rising from a side hit. Another sparks but keeps moving. A third takes a hit on frontal armor and rolls forward as if slapped by pebbles. The gunner feels ice in his stomach. So the stories were true. The 37mm can still kill if it hits weaker side armor, tracks, optics, or vulnerable spots. But frontally, especially at distance, many German tanks can shrug it off. The German response is immediate and disciplined. Turrets swing. High explosive rounds slam into likely gun positions. Machine guns rake brush lines. Mortars begin dropping behind the American ridge to catch ammunition carriers and runners. One M3 shield rings like a bell when struck by fragments. A loader collapses without sound. Another crew keeps firing over his body because stopping helps no one. The platoon commander signals for flank shots. Crews drag guns by hand, grunting, wheels digging into gravel. This is where the M3 still shines mobility. A larger gun would need trackers and time. The 37mm can be manhandled behind rocks, pivoted into a new arc, hidden again. One crew rolls into a dry wash and waits until a panzer crosses their front at barely 200 yards. Flare. The shell punches through side armor. The tank burns fiercely, hatch crew scrambling out into rifle fire. Shearing breaks out for half a second before another German shell blasts the wash with dirt and steel. In North Africa, crews learn a brutal equation. Skill can compensate for weak firepower, but only for so long. During the confused battles around places like Sidi Bouzid and Kasserine Pass, American units are often outmaneuvered, outranged, or unsupported. The M3's shortcomings become impossible to ignore. German tanks can engage from distances where the American gun struggles. Self-propelled guns and well-handled artillery target anti-tank positions before tanks even close. Some U.S. soldiers begin calling the weapon names not fit for formal reports. Others defend it fiercely. It kills if you know where to hit. Both views are true. A veteran sergeant teaches replacements to aim for tracks first. Stop him, then finish him. Another insists on waiting for side shots only. Another says fire at commanders in open hatches if armor won't yield. Doctrine bends under survival. Meanwhile, ordnance officers and commanders back in rear areas study combat reports with growing alarm. Requests intensify for stronger guns, 57mm pieces based on British designs, tank destroyers with heavier weapons, better armor-piercing ammunition. The battlefield is writing procurement policy in blood. Yet the M3 does not disappear overnight. There are too many already in service, too many units trained on them, too many sectors needing some gun rather than none. In rough terrain, narrow roads, and infantry support roles, the little cannon still earns its keep. One crew uses high explosive to smash a machine gun nest pinning rifleman. Another fires canister at close assaulting infantry, turning a desperate defense into a sudden slaughter. Another knocks out a half-track and blocks a road long enough for a battalion to withdraw. This is how obsolete weapons survive wars, by finding new jobs. At Kasserine, a lieutenant watches a disabled panzer smoking in a pass while two destroyed M3s lie nearby, wheels splintered, shields torn open. Victory and failure sit 50 yards apart. By spring 1943, American forces improve rapidly, command structures harden, air-ground coordination strengthens, tactics sharpen, newer anti-tank weapons begin arriving. But no one forgets the lesson. The M337mm had entered the war as America's standard answer to enemy armor. North Africa proved the question had changed. Soon the gun would be pushed into different theaters where German heavy tanks were absent, terrain was tighter, and infantry targets were everywhere. Jungle islands, coral beaches, volcanic ridges, places where a small cannon that could be dragged by hand might matter more than raw penetration. And there, strangely enough, the outdated gun would find a second life. November 20th, 1943, Batio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The lagoon is shallow, beautiful, and murderous. Landing craft grind to a halt hundreds of yards from shore, hung up on coral reefs that tide charts failed to explain clearly enough. Marines spill into chest-deep water under machine gun fire. Hacks drag them down. Radios drown. Men stumble forward while bullets skip across the surface like thrown stones. Ahead lies Batio, a strip of sand and concrete transformed into a fortress. And coming toward that beach, lashed into a landing craft and sprayed with salt water, is an old weapon many thought had little future left. The M337mm and a tank gun. M337mm and a tank gun. No one on Tarawa expects swarms of enemy tanks. They expect bunkers, pillboxes, log revetments, hidden machine guns firing through slits no rifle bullet can silence. In the Pacific, the war asks different questions than Tunisia. Here, the issue is not how to penetrate a panzer's glacis plate at 800 yards. It is how to blast a firing port 10 yards wide while lying in sand under direct fire. Suddenly, the little gun matters again. A marine gun crew splashes through surf dragging wheels that snag on coral heads. 4 men pull ropes from the front, 2 shove from behind. Another carries ammunition belts and loose rounds. A dead man floats past face down. No one stops. The gun shield clanks against reef stone. One loader curses the entire Pacific Ocean. Then they reach the beach wall. There is no elegant emplacement, no time to dig, no concealment worth the name. They ram the trail spades into sand and point the barrel toward a squat concrete bunker whose loophole spits tracer fire across the shoreline. The gunner wipes blood from his cheek, someone else's, maybe his own. The first high explosive shell smashes into the bunker face and bursts in smoke and chips of concrete. The firing slit goes silent for 3 seconds. Then another loophole opens farther left and starts cutting men down. Traverse. Wood. Flare. This becomes the Pacific role of the M3, not tank hunter but assault gun for infantry too close to wait for naval gunfire or artillery. It is small enough to land early, light enough to drag by hand, accurate enough to place shells where commanders point. On Tarawa, on Saipan, on Guam, on Peleliu, on countless smaller islands, crews bring the 37mm ashore because when riflemen are pinned behind driftwood and craters, a direct fire cannon is priceless. A Marine captain on Batio shouts to a crew huddled beside their weapon. That bunter, right there. No map grid, No fire mission forms, just a finger-stabbing smoke. The gun fired. Palm logs explode outward. Rifle squads surge forward. This is intimate war measured in yards, not miles. Japanese armor does appear at times, usually light tanks committed in desperate counterattacks or hidden for local defense. Against these thinner-skinned vehicles, the M3 can still do lethal work. But such moments are secondary. The real enemy is fortified terrain, caves, entrenched machine guns, snipers in coconut trunks, field pieces concealed behind a brush. The 37mm becomes a scalpel of violence. At night on Saipan, a crew is woken by the rumble of engines. A small Japanese tank attack is probing American lines. Flares rise, shadows leap. The gunner fires at muzzle flashes and moving silhouettes at less than 100 yards. One tank burned. Another slews sideways into a shell hole. Then infantry swarm behind them, screaming into darkness. The crew switches to canister. The blast turns the muzzle into a giant shotgun cone of steel balls. Men charging moments earlier vanish into chaos. Survivors dive flat. Rifle fire takes the rest. No manual can fully prepare soldiers for what canister does at close range. On Peleliu, where coral ridges hide defenders in caves, some crews fire shell after shell into openings only feet high. Heat from the barrel becomes unbearable. Globs smoke. Water poured over the tube hisses instantly. The gun is old, but steel does not care about fashion. A Marine corporal pats the shield affectionately after knocking out a pillbox. She ain't pretty, she works. Yet even in the Pacific, limits remain. The shell is small compared to larger field guns or tanks. Against reinforced concrete, repeated hits may be needed. Against deep cave systems, even direct fire can only suppress entrances. Crews are dangerously exposed while serving the weapon. Snipers target silhouettes behind shields. Mortars search for muzzle flashes. Many crews suffer terrible losses. One on Guam loses its gunner, loader, and section chief in minutes, yet surviving men continue firing because nearby infantry cannot advance otherwise. Another on Iwo Jima drags a 37mm over volcanic ash so soft wheels sink to the axle. Every yard is paid for twice. As newer weapons arrive, flamethrower tanks, self-propelled guns, rockets, demolition charges, the M3 shares the burden. It is no longer center stage, but it remains present because it is available, portable, and trusted by men who know exactly what it can do. That trust matters more than specifications in battle. Back in Europe, meanwhile, American forces increasingly rely on heavier 57mm anti-tank guns and tank destroyers against German armor. There, the 37mm is fading. But on Pacific beaches, it refuses to disappear. Because wars are never one war. A weapon obsolete in France may be indispensable on an atoll. A gun mocked in Tunisia may save lives in Tarawa. As night falls over shattered Batio, exhausted Marines lie beside the 37mm that helped carve openings through concrete and fire. The barrel is scorched, paint blister, wheels scarred by coral. It looks tired. So do the men beside it. But another island waits over the horizon. And the old gun is going with them. Winter 1944, somewhere in Europe, before first light. Snow collects along the top edge within steel gun shield. Behind it, 6 men crouch in silence around a weapon already considered yesterday's answer. Their breath hangs white in the dark. Fingers go numb inside gloves stiff with damp. One man rubs grease from the breech with a rag. Another checks shells stacked under a tarp. The gunner stares through sights at a road no one can yet see. The road is everything. If tanks come, they come there. If infantry comes, they come there. If death comes, it probably uses the road. The cannon in front of them is the M337mm anti-tank gun, but this story now belongs less to metal than to the men who served it. M337mm anti-tank gun. Every weapon has a crew culture. The loader becomes broad-shouldered from lifting rounds all day. The gunner develops a private relationship with optics, traversing hand wheels and impossible patience. The assistant gunner learns to anticipate commands before they are spoken. Ammunition bearers become pack animals with opinions. The section chief becomes father, tyrant, and gambler at once. Together they are either smooth machinery or 6 separate disasters. Training tried to create the first version. Reality often created the second before hammering it back into shape. At camps in the United States, instructors timed every movement. Round from crate. Inspect fuse. Open breech. Insert shell. Plus. Report ready. The best crews moved with almost insulting efficiency. No wasted reach, no duplicated motion, no shouted confusion. Hands seemed to know where to go before brains decided. In combat, that speed could mean another shot before a tank fired back, or another shell into a bunker before machine guns recover. Crews personalized guns the way infantrymen personalized rifles. Chalk names on shields, lucky coins taped inside trail arms, pin-up pictures hidden beneath tarps. One platoon painted tiny kill rings around a muzzle after destroying enemy vehicles in North Africa. Another crew in the Pacific tied a piece of driftwood to the axle for island luck. Soldiers are practical, superstitious creatures. The gun itself demanded labor. Its wheels clogged with mud, axles needed grease, breech mechanisms hated neglect, sights could be jarred out of alignment, shields bent under rough towing, trails cracked if abused. In rain, dust turned to paste. In deserts, sand invaded everything. A neglected gun becomes a dead gun at the first critical moment. So crews cleaned obsessively. They cleaned after firing. They cleaned after moving. They cleaned when bored, anxious, angry, or trying not to think. One veteran later said the sound he remembered most was not battle, but steel brushes inside a barrel. Meals revolved around readiness. Men ate beside the weapon because alerts came anytime. Sleep happened in fragments. One crewman always seemed awake. Another always seemed impossible to wake. Arguments were constant. Who failed to secure the tarp? Who lost the sight wrench? Who miscounted ammunition? Who snored? Who froze under fire? Then battle came, and yesterday's insults were forgotten in seconds. At Anzio, a crew uses the 37mm mostly for firing high explosive at houses suspected of sheltering snipers. They joke that they are artillery now. At night, German shelling walks across nearby fields. The men lie flat under the shield, hearing fragments slap the metal inches above their faces. In the Pacific, crews strip shirts in humid heat and loaded shells with hands wrapped in cloth because the barrel area burns skin. In Italy, mud froze on boots so thick men walked like statues. In Burma and jungle sectors, humidity rotted straps and swollen wood crates split open. Different theaters. Same chores. Same fear. The shield gave psychological comfort more than true protection. It could stop small fragments and some bullets. It could also ring like a church bell when hit, announcing exactly how vulnerable you were. Many men instinctively ducked behind it anyway. You can understand why. It is easier to trust a thin plate than open air. Casualties among gun crews were often savage because the job demanded exposure. The gunner had to see. The loader had to stand. Ammunition men had to move in the open. If tanks, mortars, or machine guns targeted the position, everyone knew where to aim. When one man fell, another slid into place. That rotation became instinct. A private who had joined a crew 2 weeks earlier might suddenly become gunner because the previous one was gone. No ceremony, no promotion speech, just necessity. Take the sight. That was enough. Some crews developed terrifying calm. One sergeant in France reportedly chewed gum while calling corrections during shellfire. Another in the Pacific insisted on keeping coffee boiling beside the gun until direct hits destroyed the pot. Others cracked in quieter ways. Hands shaking too hard to load. Eyes refusing to look over the shield. Muttering after battle. Staring at nothing. War records equipment losses neatly. Human strain less so. By 1944, many M3 crews knew their weapon was no longer first choice against serious armor. They had heard about newer 57mm guns, tank destroyers, bazookas improving, better tanks arriving. Some envied those units. Some did not. A heavier gun meant heavier work. The 37mm could still be moved by muscle, hidden in barns, pushed through orchards, rolled into upper stories, dragged into alleys. In close terrain, crews valued that freedom. One platoon in France used two M3s as improvised street guns, firing through walls to open passages for infantry moving house to house. Outdated? Maybe. Useful? Absolutely. After action, crews often counted spent casings like gamblers tallying chips. Then came cleaning, repacking, replacing wheel spokes, scavenging tarps, finding food, and trying to sleep near the gun that might need them before dawn. That is the hidden life of weapons history. Not just calibers and penetration tables, but cold fingers on breech levers. Shared cigarettes under tarps. Mud in boots. The strange intimacy of 6 men who may die together before breakfast. And while they work behind thin shields across the world, planners are already thinking ahead to post-war armies, newer guns, rockets, recoilless rifles. The M3's time is ending. But first, it still has battles left to fight.